Night has weight when a country is dark down. Engines carry a pulse you feel in your ribs. Glass carries a sheen that isn't light, but memory. Over the black fields, a Heinkel swims northwest, frost feathering the nose glazing, needles calm, a hum in the radio faceplate that says the line is true. Lieutenant Carl Brenner cups his headphones, sealing in purity. One tone in his left ear, one in his right. The balance a razor holding him centered in an invisible corridor toward a city he knows only by the place where stars will fail. He reads his stopwatch. Notes drift by how cloud shreds off the wing. Marks a time to cross on his kneeboard that agrees with the wind he computed. The instruments are honest. Below, land is erased. So he flies the sound, and each click of the timer feels like fuel spilled if he doubts. On the coast, a hut breathes varnish and hot dust under red-shaded lamps that never quite let eyes relax. Marjorie Holt sits pinned by her headphones, rotating the loop, easing the null into the quietest slot, while her other hand steadies a pencil over a map that always wants to curl back. The goniometer's needle toys with dead center as she turns the loop. She pins a bearing, calls it thin-voiced into a line that vanishes inland, and watches a grease pencil track crawl on a plotting table through a half-open door. The line angles for London again, but the angle carries a sulk she didn't see yesterday. She scratches an asterisk by the figure and holds her breath so the tone doesn't ripple in her ears while she listens for the ident's cadence to betray anything human. Brenner listens for that ident, the little Morse signature that repeats like a heartbeat and assures him he is on the right system, briefed by the meteorologist matched to his navigator's scale. Dot dash on the left, dash dot on the right. Keep them singing equal, and the aircraft threads a wire. He tweaks the course knob with 2 fingers, gentles the needle home like coaxing a clock to perfect time. Clouds lay a low lid. The altimeter reads 10,000 feet. Icing hisses faintly at an aerial somewhere behind him, a new glaze that makes the tones a shade cleaner. If anything, the guidance sounds better than last run. The corridor feels solid tonight, as if you could walk it. Holt's loop picks up the ident too, thin at first, then stronger as sky inland joins the coast, funneling it along wet marsh that carries long wave better than chalk. She rides the null a fraction past center and listens not to volume but to wobble, the breathy tremor that rides the tone when weather is thick and something man-made breathes out of step. You can't write wobble in a report without figures. She writes phase in the margin and circles her bearing twice. Her watch hand crawls. She writes the time because only time will prove what her ears are starting to admit. Beyond hedges, blackout curtains, and kettles on low flame, a shed masquerading as a barn glows with a not-quite-farm light. Arthur Sparks Dalrymple rests a palm on warm racks that smell of rosin and ozone. Filaments come up gently, the way you warm a thing with a heart. 2 men with notebooks lean forward. A third holds a finger on a breaker that grumbles when the mains sag. The mast outside is a darker stripe against cloud, guy wires humming a tired E-flat. Low power only. He nudges a knob with jeweler's patience, seeding a barely there lobe into night, waiting to see if anyone notable flinches, counting how long the sky takes to answer when you lie. Holt's pencil taps the margin like a metronome while she watches her own receiver drift. Power rationing sliced the mains an hour ago. The oscilloscope trace slipped left as heaters cooled, and she made a manual correction, then doubted it, then unwound it. She writes, mains low, watch drift, and leans in, willing the loop to tell her a secret it doesn't know it knows. The loop's old sin of ambiguity, 2 opposite nulls, a perfect deceit unless you catch the ident right, complicates a night when ground mist is beating the housing, tightening the bearings when she needs butter. She times the ident's cadence against her own set's click, hunting any heartbeat that comes too late to be sky. On Brenner's chart, the Thames is a silver rope, with a famous set of loops scratched in by hands that had time for such care. The way to find the target: trust the radio line, then the stopwatch, then the river if the blackout relaxes, and finally abjure doubt. Doubt wastes fuel. Headwinds shaved more than predicted. At cruise, at height, the Heinkel sips. But the return leg is not when to discover your caution lied. He nods to the pilot to hold course. The tones marry perfectly. The aircraft rides a seam you could sew a city on, and the cold makes every instrument feel clean. At the filter room, chairs scrape, croupier sticks extend and retract like insect legs as women and men lace bearings into tracks that cohere. Each fresh voice on the line becomes another line on the map. Holt's bearing joins 3 others and grows into a plot pointing a confident spear toward London. Yet the angle of this spear carries a left bias compared to nights prior, and an old flight lieutenant frowns and says, "Accounting for wind?" as if wind is the only animal worth naming. They need proof to call anything. Proof is something you can lay a ruler against while the night whispers otherwise. Dalrymple holds his breath in the warm, ticking air as his low-power test whispers into ether. The idea is simple in outline and devilish in tuning. Introduce a cousin to the enemy's guidance into their sky and let it sing of a different crossing point, convincing enough that at night, with headphones and a schedule, they'll believe the wrong star. This is a probe, a fingertip on the spine of a sleeping animal waiting for the twitch. His monitor man calls out the German ident, and there, under its beat, a hair's whisper of a second pulse, late by a fraction that weather could explain. Dalrymple writes the delay anyway. The night is a ledger. Every lie, every echo, every cost must tally. Ice creeps where eyes can't see. The aerials on the Heinkel's back, slender as winter grass, take on a frost that changes their length where a circuit cares. Electrically. The tuned receivers drift a shade sweeter toward what they are courting. The dot-dash balance grows truer by ear on one side of a hairline, less on the other, and the man cupping headphones knows only that the world seldom offers this level of fidelity by chance. Everything says perfect. The cloud holds back light like a conspirator. He tells himself professionalism sounds like this, and that the cold has honed his instrument rather than lied to it. Holt hears the ident again, steadier now, and her throat tightens. The second beat arrives 2/10 late, so slight it could be breath on glass, and yet the human ear is built for patterns. This late beat is not sky. It is a hand. It's not enough for a call that moves a city's sirens, not when townhouses behind blackout curtains will want correct blame tomorrow. But it is enough for a tick in the box her chief taught her to keep for moments when the ether lies. She whispers the bearing again, adds ident doublet to the message, and braces for the even acknowledgement from inland that says someone is thinking without declaring it, because to declare it is to change 1,000 plans. South of the city, a fake city holds its breath. The Decoy site is a rehearsal for catastrophe. Oil pans and timber frames laid out to suggest streets and depots, fuses running back to a sandbagged hut. The men there are practiced arsonists under orders. They light only when told, because timing is part of the lie. If the glow blooms too surely too soon, crews who fly by ear, then trust the eye, will know the stage manager is overeager. Inversion sits hard tonight, a glass lid on air. Smoke will lay low and spread like water. If guidance brings them near, the lake of smoke will do the rest, but someone must decide when to set that lake alight. Dalrymple gets his first coincidence report from a coastal station. Double beat suspected, bearing 523 true, loop drift minor, voltage low. He glances at his power meter and sees the needle nod to the baseline of the mains. Old anger rises, not at war, but at thin copper and clipboards. Voltage sag alters frequency. The heartbeat can float enough to give the game away in a different fashion. He orders the stabilizer full on, hears the transformer deepen its hum, and nods to add a half decibel to the field. No more. Push too far, and Vogt's people will smell him and sweep with kilowatts. Too little, and his whisper won't shape a Bombay hinge. High over the wrong patchwork, Brenner watches a darker darkness crawl along the left window as the pilot trims against a new tremor, a side yaw you measure by the span of a thumb. The nose loop begins to saw its stiff arc to compensate, and the pilot curses the slop. He flips to the backup loop, robust, forgiving, the vice of broad acceptance. The wider lobe is less fussy about exactness. Aligning threads becomes aligning ropes. Tones fatten a shade, confidence already a fed animal, and he strokes it. He writes down an ETA to an outer marker that should put them over the first suburbs before the bomb aimer finishes his cigarette. They will not find out on the return that caution lied, not if Brenner can help it. Holt's hut tenses with weather. Mist drapes itself over the coast. The loop's dome glistens under lantern beams as a rating walks the perimeter, knocking ice off guy clamps with a stick. Inside, Marjorie feels the weight of a second raid in her ears. Lower timbre, uglier, and forces herself to choose which bearing to trust when sensitivity falls off as the heaters cool. Her training becomes a coin in the air. She calls in the number that ear and phase wobble agree on, not the one her hand wrote earlier. If she is wrong, someone will die in one town instead of another, and that redistribution is not a comfort. Dalrymple hears a vibration in the side tone that he didn't program, wind through the mast or inversion bending his beam like a reed. Temperature inversions make liars of Morsing men, paths that should be straight curve, lobe fringes fatten, marshland becomes a whispering gallery. His antenna switchman asks whether to correct. Dalrymple says not yet. Correcting to a curve risks chasing a snake into a knot. He wants to see if the Germans stiffen their spine with power first. If they do, he knows they've smelled the hand in the bend, and he must make finesse, fight brute strength. Across the channel, in a bare room with stingy heat, Dr. Elsa Vogt stands at her console and listens to the same ident, jaw set to protect a lifetime's work. Reports have come in. Crews certain they were right, then saw a river they could not name. Curves I cannot account for, a navigator writes in precise pencil. Vogt orders checks of field stations and a sweep through authorized frequencies to catch any drift into embarrassment. The sky is full of inversions that fatten everything improperly. Pride tells her their beam is truth. Physics tells her truth bends. War whispers that a hand is adding the bend and then smiling in the dark. Brenner keeps his hand steady on the thin shell of his province. He has never lived more correctly than this, never been more aligned with the thin, perfect thing he follows. Ground control ratifies headings, keeps men awake with ritual call and response that makes eyes unnecessary. Timers tick in chorus. 3 watches started in a square by men who pretend they are not superstitious and then treat superstition as life. If London is a code in the dark, he has the key, and yet the map in his lap feels like a thing learned in daylight, which is faithful to nothing at night. Marjorie Holt's body tells her when to stretch. She doesn't. Headset fatigue begins as heat behind the ears, pushing forward to a headache bound to the smell of bakelite and the murmur of valves. Her IF filter is cut narrow to tease the tone out of mush. The longer she leans into narrowness, the more the rest of the world becomes pressure she can't adjust for. She tightens the headband and writes. Ident beat off, small, C offset. Repeat. An older voice on the line asks, confirm fractional delay? Relief pricks like nausea. Someone else heard it. That makes it matter. Dalrymple's test has created gravity where none was. It's weak, but at night, with no land to contradict you, a whisper makes a wall. He imagines the aircraft. Leather, rubber, men cupping ears, and their satisfaction as needles behave. He is asking them to trust a wrong river when they see it. Only moral because the right river is full of people he privately pledged to keep alive. He thinks of decoy men with long poles, blank faces, waiting with fuses. "We're not strong enough yet," he says. Hold. At the filter table, the lines look like a closed hand over the city, as they always do until they don't. A lieutenant with the face of a man who sleeps badly says, "If they're off by 5, we'll know when the wrong posts ring. Warnings are not targets. Warning wires buzz and bicycle lamps bob. Targeting is where you mark a bridge you've never seen. To call a sector is one thing. To light a decoy is another. They've no proof yet. The double beat sits like a hunch shared by people trained to think in straight lines. They watch tracks move in and the strand of doubt stretch. The Heinkel swims into a band where drizzle becomes needle. Ice on the aerials thickens, and the steady hum turns into something like singing. Brenner flips loop heat if the current will allow. The pilot strokes the throttle edge as if soothing a horse. The dot-dash balance becomes so exquisite, Brenner fights the animal urge to adjust for joy. The bomb aimer yawns, impatient, wanting doors open, and the ritual to begin, never understanding the drop is the shortest part of the night. The stopwatch clicks. Their calculations put them where they plan to be. The river they expect is not far if this path isn't drawing them to a cousin. Holt is handed a message through the crack. Germany ordered a new route, last-minute chatter about flak or wind. Her heart hitches. Angles shift when the line shifts. If Dalrymple is laying a seam north, he has to pull at a different parlor. She calls the number again, slower, precise, and slashes it across the map with a lead that leaves a shine. If they mistime it, her bearing will send them over roofs she knows by day. She rubs eraser crumbs off the map with a thumb and chooses the bruise of one decision over the guilt of 2. Dalrymple receives the same intelligence through channels that barely believe themselves. Reprogramming a chain is not typing a new word. It is reaching into a moving loom and convincing it to lay a warp at a different angle without snapping thread. He calls for a minute accurate shift in phase, degrees of delay, a whisper of frequency, to walk the crossing point by miles in the sky. The mains flicker as if offended. The breaker hums. The mast sings higher. "Do it," he says. "Cross north of the ring road in 8 minutes." He gambles 8 minutes of stranger's sleep. The decoy men receive a telephone that is almost rumor. Be ready. Not light, not yet. Left hands stay on long fuses. One checks his matches thrice and grins at his nerves, making them worse. The inverted sky promises smoke will behave. It will sit and spread low. It will glow like breath from deep in the city belly. If navigators are primed for glow, the fake will be mercy. If not, they will sit in the sandbagged hut smelling paraffin and think of their own roofs. Holt reconsiders the loop's sin. Ambiguity can be laid bare if you catch the ident at the right point and compare to the set's internal beat. That requires a clean reference. The set is sulking because mains are thin. She almost unplugs and replugs to bring it up clean, then decides against it. Anything needing warm-up is a temptation that steals more than it gives. The ident comes again. Clearer doublet now. She says into the line, "Offset consistent, logging, consider interference." She feels the quiet on the other end and knows someone marked that sentence and underlined it. Brenner's map has one indulgence. A river north of London he sketched lazy because it didn't matter. He treated it like a stranger he hoped never to need. Down there, cities have their own night. If he has to recognize a wrong river by feel, he will, he tells himself. But the tones are right. The crossing is right arithmetic in air. Ground control speaks in the voice that does not admit wrong. If the sky is trying to betray him, it is doing so with a gentle hand. He is good with gentle hands until they close. Dalrymple looks at the scope trace that represents manipulation of other people's nights and sees phase alignment come to heel. The slight delay he adds is an art someone will reduce to a museum placard when dust settles. Tonight it pushes a city sideways. He could be louder. He could command the night, but power attracts attention back. Men like Vogt listen for heat in his voice. He holds to finesse and hopes that in drizzle and cloud, instruments will be more trustworthy than eyes, and that his spare wattage will move metal without becoming a lighthouse. On the filter table, movement bends a fraction, north by not much, and the woman with the stick slides the marker with an expression that betrays nothing but a second thought. Coastal bearings spread, the kind of fan you get when sea is a better conductor than soil. The senior officer considers calling civil defense to light the decoy earlier, to give a glow to a navigator hungry for certainty, and hears in his own mind the fear he cannot speak. If we light too soon, we teach them our hand. He says nothing, watches another bearing arrive with doublet in the margin. Lips press thin. Someone will own the decision. The aircraft rides a seam into turbulence. Brenner heats the loop, lines up the tones again. The dot-dash balance becomes lullaby perfect, enough that he half smiles inside his mask despite the ache. He notes his time against the river curve he expects and against a drift he has felt in his bones the last hour. The bomb aimer slides into position and whispers, half to himself, that he hates this part, the waiting for seconds to consent to be minutes. Brenner thinks the glow we get will be right, and he silences the hungry part of his brain that craves a light early. Marjorie is suddenly handed a new voice on the net. Inland station, thin with effort. German order, route change, possible. It is a rumor with rank. She feels her fingers chill. If the line bends, Dalrymple's seam must bend with it, and her bearings will be wrong for 10 minutes, then right, then wrong again if weather shifts. She anchors what she can, timestamps, ident delays, voltage notes, and writes them as if each number could hold a bomb in place above empty fields. She knows that the next call may be for fighters, and fighters hate mush nights. If she asks them to climb into inversion and guess, she must be right. Dalrymple climbs his own rope. He stretches delay, brings his chain slightly forward, imagining a crossing that must move north, how many miles in air at 10,000 feet. Men inside his nets hold a drink to their lips and forget to swallow. Mains are sulking, the corporal says at the generator, his breath white. They can sulk later, Dalrymple says. He is walking his system toward discovery by being too good. He decides to be exactly as good as they need. Any better, and he becomes a night sun for Vogt to cut bearings on. Any worse, and he becomes wind. The decoy hut gets the call it wanted and feared. Ready to light. Hands tighten on rods and matches. The timing must be human enough to look like panic and controlled enough to invite trust. The inversion will keep smoke a handspan above roofs, fogging everything to mercy. They will light in patterns that make sense to a bombardier who learned cities by clean drawings, not by ash in air. They breathe out and wait for the word that turns men into flares. The smell of oil feels kinder than the smell of nothing. Holt braves the one rule she hates to break and elbows the loop through its arc twice as quickly to see if wobble changes with her impatience. It does not. The ident trails consistently, the faint tremor breathing with drizzle. She calls bearing corrected for inversion signature, knowing that phrase will anger someone inland who prefers numbers to metaphors. She adds a caution. Loop ambiguity likely tonight. She doesn't say that her own bias tilts north. She doesn't need to. The stick handlers can feel it in her voice. Brenner sees it. A river slides out of shadow with a curve a man who learned London in sun would not put at this exact moment. It bends like a question. The city around it is conjecture, with a handful of pinprick lights that are not courage but error, a bored guard cigarette, a drunk's window. He feels the stomach jerk that comes when the world shows you something you know at the wrong address. The tone is perfect. The river is wrong. He has seconds to decide which truth he belongs to. He breathes in cold that tastes of tin and time and chooses to hold the line until something breaks. Dalrymple gets his answer, a coastal return that shivers the way his own delay line does, magnitudes too close to be weather. He keeps his voice calm and says, "Phase holds, ident trailing 2/10." He looks up. The mast is a black comb scratching cloud. The decoy can't light yet. They must let the glow lines rise like a city waking in pain, not like a stage. He asks his second operator to shave a breath off the delay, to ride the German sweep without showing his anticipation. It's a duel conducted in heartbeats, with steel and plates involved only after men have made their choices. Vogt's triangulation begins to converge on a nowhere with a mast she doesn't have on last month's print. She pins a black flag there in pencil. She orders a careful power increase. More can be less if lobes smear. She asks crews to report ident clarity and any phase shimmer, a term her lab uses that pilots hate. Reports split. Clean, perfect tone. Strange river. She adds in red, "Observe rails if visible." Rails are honest under blackout, straight where streets are deceitful. She writes an internal note. If echo persists, consider timed ident variability. The stealing of her architecture is a professional insult. She feels it like cold in a tooth. Brenner tells ground, tone steady, visual glow starboard ahead, faint smoke under, river 9 o'clock. Ground tosses back the line he is trained to trust. Continue present, London nearly ahead. Ritual is stout lumber. He slides the drift meter's cope over the side window and sees false streets as if they had been built to please his instrument, which they have. He wants to ask for absolution and a spare minute. Instead, he writes a cross on his chart where no plan says a turn point exists and pretends it's a normal thing to mark the place where doubt got loud. Holt's fingers go numb, then return tingling. She keeps the loop in motion, left, right, left. The ident's second beat is late, in a way that breathes with showers. That suggests the British transmission is passing through weather, the German one is not, or vice versa. Her lamp dips, the mains sag and bloom back with a generator's grunt somewhere in the village. The null she trusted broadens and flattens. She picks one bearing anyway and presses the filter room switch, aware that a wrong bearing is poison in a communal stew. The voice on the other end says, "Flat, copied, plot north by 3. Somebody else is listening to wobble too. Dalrymple splits tone sides with care, adjusting amplitude so that dot dominates left and dash dominates right. In the center, unison, the sweet spot, he must move like a puppeteer. He asks Decoy north of London to stand by. Light when told. If they can bring a glow up under the false crossing while the German beam sings London, eyes will choose fire over memory. He hears the German power climb in his bones, more pressure leaning into his tone. Loudness isn't strength unless ears are tired. His ears aren't tired. He has learned to love restraint because it lives longer. Vogt's headset delivers the hum of her own masts, coming up hotter. She warns herself in her head that more power makes lobes fat and edges woolly. Hold at +10, she says. Report tone clarity at 5-minute intervals. She tells controllers to ask crews to verify rivers without sounding like mothers. She wants to toss a bench across the fake. Instead, she orders a sweep, looking for sideband hair where she can put a fingernail, and pry. Pride is a barbed wire she wraps in cloth. She must not bleed on it here. Inversion sits like glass over estuaries. It bends light, sound, and radio in ways that make both boards, German and British, uneasy. Dalrymple feels it in his teeth, a pressure that tightens when he steps out to look at guy wires thrumming. What he can push through clean air one night smears the next. This night writes arcs where straight edge lives. He instructs his operator to nudge phase A whisker to account for expected bend over marshes, to keep the invisible runway lined up under weather he can only guess at with a lifetime's worth of tables and a minute's worth of nerve. Hendon's filter table sees a grease line lean not toward London, but toward Luton. A finger hesitates over nothing on the map. Q-site reports trickle, fires ready, smoke primed. A civil defense liaison frets about lighting early, because once flame is up, it becomes an act of faith and a magnet for metal. Holt's bearing lands with doublet in the margin and shoves someone's hand toward the decoy. The man who will be blamed either way breathes once, twice, and decides to put fire where maps say nothing lives. He does not say it aloud. He nods, and the nod becomes orders on telephones. Aloft, the glow begins. Brenner distrusts it on principle and trusts it because it's convincing. Low and red and smeared by oil smoke, it sits exactly under the humming center he has ridden. The pilot says, "There," and the bomb aimer breathes, "Yes," because in a blackout, true light is rare and therefore significant. Brenner tells himself London has backwaters. War changes cities. He holds the line. He can call for confirmation and hear the voice that will tell him to trust the system. He doesn't. Time is a wick. He holds the flame close rather than let air blow it out. Holt can't see the decoy light. She hears her own bearing and the way the ident ticks a fraction late and holds to that because seeing is for other people. She stakes her call on the stopwatch. She breathes shallow and makes herself fill her chest. She sends another bearing north of the supposed lane and adds the warning code for inversion. She knows if the Germans pour power on now, all her fine listening will go to noise, and she will be accountable to herself for having not persisted harder in that quiet moment that mattered. Vogt is already pouring power. Her crews trail off the plan in a scatter she doesn't like, coherent in a new way she doesn't command. She orders a sweep a few kilocycles to either side, hunting the mimic's mouth. A crew reports bright and clean. Another says bright and doubled. She circles the second in red. Adjust half-degree left, report balance. She is turning crews into instruments because machines are being lied to. She must not let anger make her heavy. Heavy only works until it breaks something. She pushes for one adjustment and watches for the ripple, in pain or in order. Dalrymple stares at a meter as if looking could hold it still when the mains sag. The hut shares power with a village that is blacked out but not sleeping. Somewhere a pump takes a gulp and makes the big valves flinch. He snarls for the petrol generator, noisy and dirty, but better than drift. He nods to the decoy line. Throw heavy, burn until stars look pale. Stronger the visual, the more forgiving the radio. Too strong, and someone like Vogt will call it a lure with a surname. He feels his own tightrope in his throat and steps anyway. Under Brenner's wing, another Heinkel appears as a darker shape in cloud, then slips away. Flock comfort goes with it. He pulls the loop knob and checks angle, a practice he rarely bothers with when a beam is good, and the backup's broad lobe swallows the fake with generosity that makes the center sweeter than ever. Turbulence bumps the pilot's hand. The pencil skates across the chart. The beam loves their corrections. He feels it as he feels micro-trim and believes because you must. He tells himself this is what mastery feels like, and he knows even as he thinks it that mastery and seduction are twins at night. The filter room plot shifts. The sticks push tracks toward a glow that decoy photographs will show later as beautiful. A small flag appears near a town that has not known much of the war. Decision passes from rumor to policy. Warnings swing north. Ambulances turn. Bomb disposal men are roused. Holt hears the room change through voices that ask her again about the ident delay, not to blame, but to own it. She writes in her log 2259 ZID, fake confirmed by timing offset, then adds, weather wobble increased. She keeps her tone flat. It's not for her to sound proud or afraid. She is a hinge. Vogt peels off one glove and feels valve cage warmth, proof and worry. She orders a hold on the power climb. She wants to see if crews who heard the double beat now report clean, and whether those heading toward a newly born glow keep heading. Pride is a live wire. She refuses to grip it. She orders triangulation again and points a receiver at Dalrymple's lattice. She brings attention like a searchlight to a man who would rather be air. If she finds him, it is one victory. If she doesn't, he is still there and will be smarter tomorrow. The field she lives in does not forgive the same mistake twice. Dalrymple's men hear the German sweep as a pressure leaning against their signal, like a shoulder in a queue. The operator's trained finger hovers on the tuning knob and holds the slot where they sound right to themselves and wrong to their enemy. Dalrymple sends a runner to the coastal hut. Hold your bearings tight. Watch loop ambiguity. Two voices are shouting the same name. Loops can bury their null in the wrong place. Their confidence is tethered to a tiny timing irregularity. He prays that nobody with a latchkey at a substation sneezes. Brenner clicks the call button and gives tone and visual reports in a voice taught to sound as if certainty is a trade he bought wholesale. "Go on," the controller says, ritual calm. London nearly ahead. The words are not spell work, they feel like it anyway. He tastes cold metal as his teeth press. He runs his forefinger along the lazy river he drew north of London and shames himself for not caring about that curve when he had daylight to fix it. He breathes out and decides that daylight knowledge has no rights over him tonight. He holds center because center is clean. The decoy field sets itself alight. A long pole dips into an oil pit and Orange breathes alive, then gallops in a line. Shapes they built, street corners of timber, roofs from frames, become something useful under smoke that clings. From above it will look like a town that forgot how to hide. They have been told this makes them targets as much as saviors. They keep cigarettes cupped in palms. Faces turn from heat. A supervisor counts down and orders the next pans lit, stepping the glow so it looks like panic spreading across a ward map, rather than a plan getting what it asked for. Volk's triangulation narrows on a well-chosen nowhere. She pins it and wishes for a bomber with a bomb for it. She orders the ident timing to wander unpredictably, a change only her testers know, to see if the mimic can keep up. If it can, then she is facing a real chain and not a man with a good ear at a bad table. Crews call in glow starboard. She chews the inside of her cheek and refuses to let her voice change as she says trust the stronger tone. Lights are lures tonight. She hates that she has to say that to men who trust numbers because she trained them to. The rain quickens, a hiss on the hut roof that makes guy wires sing higher. The generator chugs like a reluctant dog. Dalrymple touches the cabinet with the back of his fingers and feels warm, not hot. Good. He is on a ridge, soft, and the Germans own the night, hard, and they come looking for his flare. He tells his operator to keep the ident delay exact, 0.2, resist human improvement. People reveal themselves when opponents are listening for a tell. He has never been so aware that his art is not building, it is not leaving fingerprints. The Heinkel becomes a vector. Doors, the pilot says, and hydraulics awaken. Cold fog snakes in as proof there is open air below. Brenner checks ETA against stopwatch, against last wind correction. They meet at a point he can stand on. The glow is right where the tone says it should be. He wants to think he knows London by smell, but at 10,000 feet, the nose he's been given is electrical. He gives the word ready, and the intercom makes it sound like a sentence starting, not ending. A decision has been taken. Its cost will be counted by other people. In the hut, another coastal station miscalls a bearing by a few degrees. Holt hears fatigue seducing good people. She leans opposite to compensate for inversion she feels now in her jaw. She adds another ident delay time. Persistence matters when truth is a few seconds wide. She asks the filter room to shift fighter warnings farther north, even though fighters are few, and the weather hates them. She wants someone to have a chance at slow returners. She knows that what she wants is a luxury, but she asks because her ears earned it. Vought gets a crew report. Perfect tone, unfamiliar river. She wants to shout. Instead, she says, 1 degree right, report balance, then tells ground prepare to shift the second wave's plan. That late change will cascade through fuel and reserve margins in a winter night. If she does nothing and the beam is bent, they will deliver on the wrong city and call it success. Pride knots her jaw. She chooses adjustment. The burden will be a morning of men asking why. She will answer them with pencil and wounds. Dalrymple counts breaths and the intervals between German surges. He has made a thing that is working, worst and best feeling. Success is a kind of light. Light draws. He writes, risk of detection rising, circles it, underlines, keep cadence steady. A corporal brings him tea the color of varnish. He doesn't drink it. He walks the narrow aisle, touching shoulders, connecting a human circuit to an electrical one. He checks the sequence lights for his huts. They wink in a rhythm he can feel in his teeth. He will remember this rhythm if he has to run for his life. Brenner's bomb aimer calls target and hesitates, a human blip in a process designed to iron them out. The river under the nose is wrong by a gesture. He looks to his navigator for confirmation. Brenner gives a nod like a trigger squeeze because the beam sings perfect, the stopwatch agrees, the glow is in the right place. He cannot see oil pans and careful geometry. He sees an enemy city. The doors yawn open, cold air scours. The aircraft lightens in a way that makes men feel naked tonight. He tells the pilot, steady, and prays to numbers. At the decoy site they see a shape for once, not just hear it. They do not cheer. They look at each other with guilty gratitude that what they built works. They hold light steady. A truck coughs, hauling power for a pump to feed oil. The lights flutter, and a man swears. They burn true again, and the sky answers with a deepening growl. Someone whispers a name he isn't supposed to say because speaking is superstition, and superstition is a rail you hold when there's nothing else to grab. They hold because faltering would make a different story that kills strangers the wrong way. Holt hears the far station shout that the ident went clean. Cold runs along her spine. German power is doing what she would do in Vogt's place. She tightens the loop and listens longer than comfortable for phase wobble in drizzle. It's there, faint, weather's fingerprint on the lie. She says into the phone, crisp because it must be, still there, keep decoy, maintain plot north. She glances at the hut's voltmeter like a gambler checking a clock. The minute hand moves whether you win or not. You only choose what you make it do for you. Vaught's triangulation comes back a messy triangle, missing a corner, its center where she didn't think a mast could be. Of course it can. The enemy is not poor. She increases power a fraction, orders a retune of modulating tones sharper by hair to slide the sweet spot back. She demands crews report rails. She is in a duel with a good hand. Respect creeps in like fog. She will burn that respect out in the morning over coffee, but now it keeps her from underestimating. She writes a note to herself to ask for resources she won't get. Dalrymple feels the same duel as ache in his jaw. We might be triangulated, he tells his lads. Don't be brave, be precise. He looks at the mast, a line against low cloud. He trims power just a squeeze, reducing his signature while holding effect. The decision sits like a coin in his gut. He reaches for the dial and listens to tone with half his brain and hut breathing with the other. He hears the wind find a new note in the guy wires and takes it as a sign to move one hair more, nothing others would call a move. Two beams roar now, one real, one counterfeit. Brenner's phones are full of the louder one. His eyes are full of a glow that makes up its own mind about truth. For a second, he believes every choice tonight resolves into this alignment. He calls final. The pilot squares the wings. The hum fills his skull until he wonders if silence exists anymore. He leans over the bombsight, breath shallow, the wrong river below like a signature he is about to write. Numbers become doors. He walks through knowing they lock behind him. In an instant, edge pressure shifts. The tone he rides snaps cleaner, stronger. The counterfeit goes thin, as if a curtain tore. The aircraft drifts the width of a wingtip. The dashes bite back. The compass settles on the ordained line. Fuel in Brenner's head drops grain by grain through a bottleneck he cannot widen. He feels his faith in numbers swell with the louder voice. He does not know that a breaker slammed in a damp shed across a sea to protect a plate transformer from burning, that for a few seconds silence saved a piece of gear and almost cost a town. In the coastal hut, Marjorie yanks off and reseats her headset as her shaded tone vanishes and the goniometer's null kicks, sliding towards sea. Lamps dull to brown under voltage sag. She must choose whether the hotter signal is truth exercising its right to be heard or the enemy forcing her machine into obedience. The switchboard girl counts seconds aloud to log the drop. Holt puts a finger on the map until the lights breathe back. She can't trust sight. She trusts habit. When the center returns, she rides it into voice before anyone can breathe doubt into the room. Dalrymple swears softly as his tubes wink black and the room contracts into damp darkness. He smells insulation and tin oxide. The breaker tripped to save the plate. He hears in that sudden quiet the throb of bombers closing the path his hand drew. He slams the breaker back. Filaments rise orange like waking embers. He eases hand to coils, nursing frequency back to where iced aerials will hear them sweetest. Hastiness will shear phase and make the lie clank. He controls his breathing because air's rhythm becomes hand's rhythm, becomes war's rhythm when machines are this close to people. Elsa Vogt hears reports change from confused to crisp enough to mark as reclaimed. Tone centered. Course good. ETA amended. Satisfaction ticks. Small and stabbing. Clarity needles her too. The earlier wobble had a weather fingerprint. It is gone like a competitor fell. She writes the time and power level. She must document relief. Undescribed relief evaporates under blame. She keeps a sliver of her ear on the sweep, still sniffing for sideband shimmer. If the British chain went dark for a heartbeat, it will come back if they're any good. She tenses to ride that return, as if expecting surf after a big boat passes. Dalrymple feels the chain bite properly again. Station 2 trails by a whisper. Station 3 leads by a sigh. The scope trace is alive where a healthy world would show steady. He keys the ident precisely wrong by a heartbeat and prays geometry will put flame in empty fields. He signals the decoy to add a line of fire mimicking a rail yard, to vector men's eyes the way their instruments are already urging. He knows they're living at the edge of what the chain can do and that this edge is where outcomes get made. He feels the hut's warmth under his palm and wishes it were a hand. Brenner counts. Numbers feel like falling off a stair that isn't there anymore. He says them anyway because words have weight only when they arrive on time. He hears the bomb aimer's breath in his headset, the small intake right before release. The aircraft shudders as weight steps away. Below, the fake city recoils in petrol petals, a flowered bloom under nursed smoke. He marks time, heading, egress direction. Turn, he says. The pilot banks into air that fragments them. Turbulence shakes the compass card. The loop nods as if pleased with its work. What happens outside is now irrevocable. Holt flinches as a distant thump rolls under the sea mist and refuses to translate sound into impact. Discipline keeps cause and effect separate for her own sake. She calls one more bearing to mark return tracks and give guns a taste of chances. She hears a new ident in the mess, small, high, fighter control, and calls it sharply. An ambush might sit like a kink in a hose for homebound bombers. She tastes fatigue like metal and chews it back. Her pencil is a blade she won't drop until her relief taps her shoulder. Dalrymple holds the lie alive for the stragglers. Bomber streams stagger when breakers blink. He remembers a chart about Heinkel speeds, headwinds that turn fuel into a fuse. He keeps hands light so a man a minute behind doesn't look down and see truth, the first wave made smaller. He signals decoy men to modulate, add and withdraw, imitate water mains failing, firefighters fighting. He thinks his job is architecture and realizes that tonight it's stagecraft. Stagecraft rescues as well as kills. He allows himself one pleased violence of thought. We made them see what they were trained to want. Vogt writes notes that will be her armor later. Times, frequencies, power levels. A controller asks if this is sabotage at home because crews are split, some proud, some perplexed. The English are noisy, she says levelly. Weather bends beams. Better answers at dawn. She marks rivers over county lines, knows she must ask for money and authority to fix blind spots none believed in until tonight. She will be told to do more with less. She will anyway. Pride will change shape into resolve by breakfast. For now, she keeps her fingerprint soft on the dials and doesn't chase ghosts she can't prove. Brenner feels the aircraft breathe relief as weight goes and something in his chest loosens like a knot he didn't know he'd tied. He watches the fake burn in pedal discipline and feels an anger he tells himself is righteous at the craft below. He writes time and heading, speaks less on the intercom because words feel heavy. The radio crackles with ground's tidy gratitude and rumors of what others did while they did theirs. He scribbles a note to say in debrief, river wrong, tone perfect, glow persuasive. He will say it calmly because fluster wastes lessons. Holt marks bearings of returners, lower and slower, good meals for guns. She notes the voltage drop easing as the village generator finds a calm note. Drizzle leaks under the door. The loop's bearings resume their older shape now that the counterfeit chain is cooling. She allows one thought of tea, rejects sweetness. The phone rings. A voice she will never meet says quietly, "Well done." She doesn't say, "We were lucky," because luck is a word poor people are given when they did hard work. She says, "Copy," and writes the time down anyway, as if it will matter in the morning. Dalrymple leans in the doorway and watches their fires from far enough that the illusion doesn't fool him. From here, he can tell frames from factories. From the sky, it never will. He calls the station to start damping, to let glow die like water mains burst, to squeeze plausibility for the last wave. He writes a list of fuses and resistors, an official report that will not mention the improvisation with a screwdriver blade and prayer. He allows the thought that someone is alive tonight because his breaker saved his transformer and his men held their nerve. He doesn't say it aloud. He nods to himself and steps back inside to warm his hands on a cabinet. Vogt drafts a message to Berlin in respect and steel. The enemy has an imitation chain. Inversions create phase anomalies we can exploit and must guard against. Insist on field calibration beyond manuals. The war is as much tone as metal now. As she writes, two idents hum in her ear, a hair apart. She wonders what woman sat in a wooden hut to make that work, breath smoking in a room that smells of varnish. She decides she would have liked that woman in another life, and then files that thought with the rest of the things she cannot admit to today. Brenner bends the route north to avoid predicted flak and sees below them a dark ribbon where marsh begins, a living demonstration of ground conductivity, of how long waves bow for water and lie for chalk. He realizes the enemy paints with that brush. He watches fuel and knows he owes tailwinds a favor. His voice on the intercom is careful now. nothing to inflame, nothing to comfort. He lists facts. The men listen because facts feel like wool blankets when you have done a thing that can never be undone. Holt keeps the loop moving until the last track drifts toward the sea. She takes one last slow bearing on an engine that sounds more tired than the others and calls it in. Somewhere, a battery answers with a sound like hills deciding to stand up. She doesn't glamorize that or shrink from it. She tends a farm of small numbers. The night becomes a stack of papers she will tie with string. Each page is a tiny tilt of the world in pencil. She writes her name at the bottom because names bind choices to people and people to mornings. Dalrymple steps out to the mast at dawn. Frost steams from the guy wires as if breath is finally allowed. He touches lattice with his palm like an animal that carried him. The cabinets behind thrum with residual warmth. The hush after a night when air was a battlefield sits around his ankles. He can hear in his nerves the residue of tones they sent and stole and sent again. He locks the shed, the warm-breathed beast, quiet. He slides a key into his pocket with gravity because tonight it was a city he held still with phase and coil. Vogt watches first light-wash faces in the relay truck. The driver wipes condensation from the window with the side of his hand. She imagines the English have their own dawn smells, coal and wet earth and paraffin, same as hers, and imagines once that somewhere a woman took off her headset and laughed, then cried. She folds charts, squares them against a world that outnumbers paper, and starts the engine to drive to a chalk hill where propagation is a different animal. She promises herself to ask for the things her science needs, and to find ways when they say no. Brenner sees the sea like tin and calls Bering to ground, clipped as if cutting words saves fuel. They cross the coast with gauges miserly. He files in his head what he'll say. Glow convincingly placed, tone overwhelmingly clean, river wrong but elements persuasive. He says it dull on purpose. Pride would waste what the night taught him. He stays in the line until someone else lifts his set and his burden. Sleep will not come. He will stare at a ceiling and hear twin tones and hear in them both perfect right and perfect wrong. Holt hears the first birds in the hedgerow as she writes the last log entry. She signs her name like a promise to show up again tonight and the next. The invisible roads will be laid again and must be walked. She hangs her headphones on the hook, rubs ache from her jaw where the band bit. She tips back her chair and sees, in her mind, wire looping the sky. There is coffee somewhere. There is sleep. There is the knowledge that the next night will require all the same small bravery. At dawn, Frost steams off a silent mast as the camera lingers on a looping wire, an invisible line that moved a city by miles.